Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor, formerly Prince Andrew, is officially out of Royal Lodge. It's understood Andrew left under the cover of darkness, booted from his residence earlier than expected.
Everyone's talking about Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor being evicted from Royal Lodge, but the real story isn't the eviction itself. It's what happened during his first week at Wood Farm, the grocery deliveries, the Corgi sightings, the locals who are flabbergasted, that reveals just how far he's fallen. And toward the end, we'll get into the exact moment that triggered this entire move, the one decision King Charles made that Andrew couldn't fight back against. So let's start with the move itself. Andrew left Royal Lodge in the middle of the night on a Monday, not during the day, not with any kind of public statement or dignified departure, under the cover of darkness so no one would see. The 65-year-old was driven from the 30-room mansion in Windsor to the Sandringham estate in Norfolk, about 2 hours northeast of London. And he didn't go straight to his permanent home either. He's currently staying at a place called Wood Farm, a temporary property until renovations are finished on his actual residence, Marsh Farm, which won't be ready until April. Now, Wood Farm is a 5-bedroom cottage. If you're thinking that sounds modest compared to Royal Lodge, you'd be right, it's a massive downgrade. But here's where it gets uncomfortable. Wood Farm isn't just any property on the Sandringham estate, it's the same cottage where Prince Philip, Andrew's late father, spent his retirement. After stepping back from public duties in 2017, Philip chose Wood Farm as his private retreat, away from the pressures of royal life, away from Sandringham House, away from everything. He lived there until his death in 2021, so Andrew isn't just being moved to a smaller home. He's being sent to the place his father used to escape royal scrutiny. The symbolism is hard to ignore, and it gets stranger when you realise Wood Farm has an even older association with royal exile. Back in the early 1900s, it was home to Prince John, the so-called Lost Prince, a royal who was hidden from public view due to epilepsy and learning difficulties. He died there in 1919, largely forgotten by history. Now it's Andrew's turn to fade into the background. But this wasn't just about symbolism. Within days of arriving, the reality of Andrew's new life started to show. On Friday, just 4 days after his Monday night, mover Waitrose delivery truck was spotted pulling up to Wood Farm. The van stayed for about 15 minutes before leaving. Now, Waitrose is the upscale supermarket chain the royals are known to favour. Nothing scandalous about that, except this is a man who, until last week, lived in a palatial mansion with private chefs and a full household staff, and now he's ordering groceries like any other customer. The delivery itself raises questions. How much staff does Andrew actually have left? Reports suggest he demanded a 6-bedroom home with full staff when he was forced to leave Royal Lodge, but it's unclear if he got what he asked for. What we do know is that Wood Farm is isolated, tucked away about 2 miles from Sandringham House, overlooking marshland. One reporter who visited the area recently described being caught off guard by the smell agriculture, wetlands, the kind of place that's peaceful if you want solitude, but suffocating if you're there against your will. And then came the sighting that solved a mystery people had been wondering about since the eviction was first announced. Andrew's protection officers were photographed walking 2 Corgis around the grounds of Wood Farm, not just any Corgis, Muick and Sandy, the late Queen's beloved dogs. After Queen Elizabeth died in September 22, Andrew and his ex-wife Sarah Ferguson took them in. They'd been living quietly at Royal Lodge for the past 2 years, but once the eviction became official, no one knew what would happen to them. Would they stay with Andrew? Would they go with Sarah to her new separate home? Now we have the answer. The Corgis are with Andrew. The protection officers were seen walking them near Wood Farm earlier this week, and the dogs looked settled, exploring the estate like they'd already adjusted. But Andrew himself? Nowhere to be seen. Which brings us to the most complicated part of this entire move, what it means for Sarah Ferguson. It was an unusual arrangement, one they both defended publicly over the years. Sarah called it a partnership. They raised their daughters there. They supported each other through scandals, health scares, public humiliation. But that's over now. Sarah's not moving to Norfolk with Andrew. She's reportedly moving into a home of her own, marking the end of their decades-long co-living arrangement. Some reports say she's considering a granny flat on a property in Oxfordshire. Others suggest she's looking at Portugal. She was recently photographed overseas, weighing her options, and sources close to her emphasize that she plans to move forward independently. This is the second major separation for them. The first was in 1992, when they initially split. Now, 34 years later, they're separating again, this time not by choice but by circumstance. And while Sarah is out exploring her next chapter, Andrew is stuck in a farmhouse in rural Norfolk, ordering Waitrose deliveries and walking Corgis he inherited from his late mother. But it's not just Andrew who's adjusting. The locals near Wood Farm have opinions too. One pub owner in the area said residents are 50-50 on having Andrew as a neighbour. Others used words like flabbergasted and appalled. Sandringham has always been a private, peaceful retreat for the royals. It's not the kind of place where you expect controversy to follow you. And yet here's Andrew arriving in the middle of the night with protection officers and Corgis and a Waitrose account, whether the locals like it or not. The good news for Andrew, if you can call it that, is that Sandringham has a no-fly zone over it. No drones, no aerial surveillance. He can move around without paparazzi tracking his every step, but that also means he's more isolated than ever, and this is only temporary. Come April, he'll move again, this time to Marsh Farm, his permanent residence. Marsh Farm has been described as boggy, ramshackle and outdated. It's even more remote than Wood Farm, sitting on the outskirts of the Sandringham estate. Renovations are currently underway, but there's already been confusion. Reports say moving trucks brought some of Andrew's belongings to the wrong property on the estate, which gives you an idea of how chaotic this transition has been. Andrew reportedly pushed for a 6-bedroom home with full staff, but it's unclear whether King Charles agreed to those terms. So why is this happening now? Andrew spent years refusing to leave Royal Lodge. He had a lease, he had funding. In fact, in July 2005, he actually won the standoff with King Charles. The king had been trying to evict him since 2024, cutting off his annual allowance, pulling his security funding, doing everything short of physically removing him. And Andrew found a way to stay. He secured his own private funding, no one's entirely sure where from, and paid for the upkeep of Royal Lodge himself. It looked like he'd outlasted his brother. But then came October. New Epstein files emerged. Emails showing that Andrew had stayed in contact with Jeffrey Epstein longer than previously admitted. Contact that continued even after Epstein's conviction. The revelations reignited public outrage, and this time, King Charles didn't hold back. On October 30, 2025, Buckingham Palace announced that Andrew was being stripped of all his remaining titles, not just suspended, removed. No prince, no His Royal Highness. And that wasn't just symbolic. Removing the titles gave King Charles the legal authority to force Andrew out of Royal Lodge. Without his royal status, Andrew lost the protections that had kept him there. The eviction notice was served. And within weeks he was gone, so here we are. Andrew's first week at Wood Farm has been marked by Waitrose deliveries, Corgi walks, and a growing sense that this isn't temporary exile, this is his new reality. Sarah's moving on without him. The locals don't want him there. His permanent home won't be ready for months, and every time another round of documents comes out, the pressure builds. What stands out most is how quickly it all collapsed. 1 month he was winning the battle to stay at Royal Lodge. The next, he was being driven through the night to a farmhouse in Norfolk. Different circumstances, different locations, but the same pattern keeps repeating. Public scandal, palace reaction, isolation. So here's the question, do you think Andrew will accept this new life, or will he keep fighting? Is this punishment fair, or has the palace gone too far? And what happens when the next batch of revelations surfaces? Let me know in the comments. And if you want to see how the palace has handled other scandals like this behind closed doors, check out the video I'll link at the end. Don't forget to subscribe because this story is far from over.